Hi, I'm Tammy Walker from Boxy Queens, an unofficial member of the Legion of Doom. I'm creating the Hall of Doom, and let me show you how I did it. Now, the Hall of Doom is from Super Friends, a cartoon by Hanna-Barbera from 1973 to 1985, and we had the good guys, the Justice League, with their leader being Superman, and then we had the bad guys called the Legion of Doom, and their headquarters were the Hall of Doom, with their leader being Lex Luthor. So I thought, oh, this will be a fun project to make, but I did have a lot of issues when I was making this project, but it turned out pretty good at the end. My first thing I did was cut out some styrofoam and I glued it together. And then I just slowly started cutting it away to make it a dome. Now, this first dome, I used a air dry polymer clay on it, thinking it would give me a nice smooth surface. But when it dried, it cracked away on the edges and it wasn't sandable. So I did try many other things to fix it, but eventually put that to the side and started making a new one. And the new one was a lot smaller of a dome size, and I used Sculpting mold on that, which you just wet it down, put it on, and then I sanded it as smooth as I could to make a nice surface for my Hall of Doom. And there's a comparison of the first one I did and the second one. And I spent a lot of time sanding this down, got it as smooth as I could, and put a layer of gesso on it. I'm pretty proud. It looks pretty smooth. Now I have to work on the base. I've just cut that out of foam and putting joint compound over everything. I'm just doing this for camera, but I'm a little bit more aggressive on it. When that dries, I'm just going to sand it down and then put some gesso with a tint of color and make sure I fill in all the gaps and cracks so I don't have any resin that leaks in through into the foam. And I get the edges, I put that aside, let it dry, and then come back with my last coat of this dark blue, paint everything, and those two little islands, I painted those a dark green. My first thought was to go ahead and make the details with cardstock. So I made a template out of paper towels, I made my little cardstock pieces, I glued them on, painted it, and I did not like how it turned out at all. So the fun part is getting to destroy it and tear it off of there. And go ahead and take my sandpaper and just finish up and smooth it back out again to where any glue spots may have been. And I just start drawing out my details of what I want to do on here and to get a little bit more accurate than the cardstock was giving me. Somewhere in this series of events, I made the base with some paper towel holder and some balsa wood, and also the base of the dome with some black foam board, and just glued that right on there. This is the picture I'm using for my Hall of Doom. And this is the time I'm getting out my air dry clay from Crayola, and I'm going to go ahead and use my pasta roller and make little sheets of that, pre-cut out little sections of it and get it to fit. And then what I'll do is put some of that white tacky glue down and spread it out within the line, lay my clay over that area, smooth it out a little bit, and cut away the excess pieces off the sides. Now this smooths really well if you want to when it's still wet by using a brush and some water and just smooth out all the lines and the marks. But if you let this dry, it sands very well too. The clay took less than an hour to dry, so I was able to do the layers and all the stages. Now it's important to seal this clay because paint does not like to stick to it, so I just used some gesso and painted all the edges. Then I come in with my lighter purples and do the majority of the painting across everything, and then I come in with my smaller brushes and start to do all the details in black. And in the little eye shades, I actually add some glow-in-the-dark paint, and so we'll see that later on in the video. I made a dam with my plexiglass and glued it onto the edges of the diorama. I also cut out a little bit of center section to place my base into the diorama, put some joint compound around that, and later I'll go back and paint that and seal that. I'll set this aside to dry for 24 hours, and I'll go ahead and come back the next day and make some resin. So I'm going to pour equal parts of hardener with the equal part of resin, and I'll stir those for about a minute and a half. I'll pour them back into the other cup, stir that for a minute and a half, and then I have this misty kind of foggy blue acrylic paint, and I'm going to squirt some into the resin and mix that up, and that will give me that nice cartoony blue foggy look the water has that I'm going for. I had a lot of problems pouring the resin and with some other issues, but I did lose the footage on that, and I'm okay with that. So it would have turned out perfectly with this first pour if I didn't have any mistakes, but this project was about making every mistake possible, and I always find that fun and challenging, and maybe I'll learn a lesson or two. Now, to make that moss, I have my coarse turf and my Mod Podge gloss. I mix those up together in a little container and I paint it on, and you can see it's still drying. And I went ahead and also sealed the dome with a satin sealer. I wish I would have went matte because the water droplets would have looked way better with the matte around it, but I can always go back and fix that if it really bothers me. But at the end, I really liked the project, how it turned out. It's static grass time. This is one of my favorite things to do. I've recently learned they make a smaller static grass applicator to get into tighter fit areas, but the problem with the big one is my hand is too small and it puts a lot of pressure on my arm trying to hold it, so I might go ahead and invest in to the smaller applicator. So I first paint on that Mod Podge mat. I do all the things I'm supposed to do here, and I shake on the static grass. And I'll do this in 1 or 2 coats, dump it off, do it again maybe, and then pour it right back into the container when I'm done for another use. And while that glue is still wet, I'll sprinkle on some weeds, fine turf from Woodland Scenics. It's time to make the trees. I twisted a bunch of wires together. I've got that polymer air dry clay out, and I will pre-glue the wires and then wrap out around the wires the clay. And I'll do that up to a certain point. I'll let that dry 24 hours. I'll come back and I'll add another wrapping around the whole tree, almost all the way up to the tip of the branches. And then I'll hand sculpt in some knot holes and the bark pattern. This type of clay seems to paint pretty easily, so I paint everything black, and after that dries, I'll go back over with some purples, some blues, and grays, and dry brush on there to kind of give that cartoony look with a little bit of dimension. To make my ripples in the swamp, I use my Mod Podge gloss, and I'll just go around and around and around it, smoothing it out as I go, adding more, and that will dry completely clear and shiny. Now we have the trees set in. I'm going to start to add some taller grass and some moss and some cattails and what other little odds and ends I might have into different spots to add some height. We have a little bit of white water, so we'll take some of that snow I have from Woodland Scenics, mix it with that Mod Podge gloss, and I will go ahead and just paint it on to just like how the picture had it. A little bit underneath here, and a little bit of riplets around the edges of the swamp. I ended up with over 3 hours of footage for this project, but I was able to condense it down to under 10 minutes. So I've got it all complete. It looks really good. You can see the ripples around, and I got my trees in there, the cattails. I also made a tiny little alligator out of the polymer clay. I gave him some glow-in-the-dark eyes. We'll see him light up in a second. Painted my little signature on there. I also made a watercolor backdrop. I did several backdrop ideas, but ended up with my original one, and I glued some cotton ball mist on the back there. I really didn't need to do that, but I thought it would be fun, so I just threw it in there. I thought, why not? So we'll see what it looks like into the black light, And oh, it looks so adorable. I love how the purples pop really good and the little eye shine coming out of there. Hey, thank you so much for supporting my channel. I really appreciate it, and I really hope you have a great day.